Welcome to the InnoGuide podcast. I'm your host, Bob Boudelier. This podcast, my website, and my weekly newsletter focus on helping you discover the secrets of innovation. Since I don't rely on paid ads, I want to thank our customers who subscribe to our AI Fusion Kickstarter program and those who leverage AI Fusion product development and coaching to bring human-centered AI into their organizations. You can find us at www.innoguide.net. In this episode, number 73, we'll be sharing Moving the Needle with Lean OKRs by Bart Den Haak. I enjoyed this book. It has a lot of facts and figures in it, making it a challenge for a podcast. So I tried to smooth those things out, and certainly anybody who's interested in learning more about the topic of Lean OKRs can certainly buy the book. And I recommend it because OKRs have always been a challenge for everybody. So having a better defined, more streamlined way to do it will be of benefit to everyone who is implementing OKRs in their company. So without further ado, please enjoy this episode. Welcome to the InnoGuide podcast, where we share the works of authors and mentors to guide innovation. Let's get started. If you've ever worked somewhere that had a big mission statement on the wall, something bold, inspiring, almost cinematic, but your actual day-to-day job felt like 1,000 tiny tasks with no clear connection to that mission, then you already understand the problem this book is trying to solve. Because the real killer inside most organizations isn't laziness or lack of talent, it's disconnect. It's the slow drift where people stop believing that what they do on Tuesday afternoon matters to the thing the company claims it's trying to accomplish. Once that disconnect sets in, motivation becomes a management problem, alignment becomes a meeting problem, and progress becomes hard to even define. This story begins with that feeling. Chapter 1. The moment you realize important isn't enough. The author opens with a personal story from a high-stakes environment, the European Space Agency and the Galileo program. The kind of work that should feel meaningful. On its face, serious mission, serious consequences, smart people, global importance. But the lesson is uncomfortable. Even in an organization like that, people can lose motivation when they can't see progress and when their daily work feels disconnected from the ultimate goal. You can tell people the mission is important. You can even believe it yourself. But if the work doesn't feel connected, if progress isn't visible, if the goal isn't trackable, motivation leaks out. And that's where OKRs enter the story. Not as a trendy framework or a corporate fad, but as an attempt to solve something deeper. How do you make purpose visible? How do you make progress visible? How do you keep the mission from turning into wallpaper? This chapter ties this to classic goal-setting research. The basic idea is straightforward. Specific goals beat vague goals, and hard goals, when people accept them, often produce higher performance. People focus more, persist longer, and put in more effort. But the author doesn't stop with performance research. He pivots to motivation. And he borrows a simple, sticky frame from Daniel Pink. People are motivated less by carrots and sticks and more by three things. Purpose, the work has to matter. Mastery, I'm getting better at something meaningful. And autonomy, I have control over how I do the work. He even gives a practical shorthand. Motivation equals purpose plus mastery plus autonomy. OKRs, he argues, are especially good at clarifying purpose, what matters now and why. But mastery and autonomy don't disappear automatically. Those are leadership choices, a culture choice, a system design choice. So before OKRs are even defined, the book is already sending a message. If you treat OKRs like a paperwork exercise, you'll get paperwork. If you treat them like a system for meaning and progress, you can get something else entirely. This chapter zooms out and asks a question leaders rarely ask honestly. What are goals actually for? Not in the abstract, but in your organization. Are you trying to improve decisions, spur innovation, execute strategy, create clarity, prioritize, reduce chaos? There's even an exercise called your why, because the author believes that if the why is fuzzy, OKRs degrade into bureaucracy. That leads into a quick history lesson. Not because history is fun, but because it explains why OKRs aren't just SMART goals with better branding. MBO, Management by Objectives, was earlier. It relied on managers and employees agreeing on goals. It struggled with engagement, tracking, and writing objectives that meant anything. SMART goals improved goal quality, but still didn't fit fast-changing environments. OKRs, popularized at Intel by Andy Grove, added a key innovation, key results, and a crucial operating change, shortening the feedback cycle. Instead of annual goals that you revisit when it's too late, OKRs shift toward a quarterly rhythm with measurable signals. Not because quarters are magical, but because shorter cycles create learning and accountability. And here the book introduces an idea that becomes the quiet backbone of the whole method. People do better when they experience frequent progress in meaningful work. Even small wins matter. OKRs at their best manufacture small wins, not through hype, but through cadence and visibility. Then comes one of the book's first memorable anchors, John Doerr's FACTS, F-A-C-T-S, Benefits of OKRs. F for focus, A for alignment through transparency, C for commitment, a social contract, T for tracking, visible progress, S for stretching, ambition and risk-taking. But right after the benefits come a hard rule, described as non-negotiable. Do not tie OKRs to compensation, because the moment you do, stretch goals become political. People sandbag, they avoid risk, they hide problems, they turn a learning system into performance theater. And the author wants OKRs to be a learning system. Next, the chapter draws a bold line that will matter later. OKRs are most valuable for big I innovation, breakthroughs, step change outcomes, the kind of goals that require new thinking, not for incremental optimization of the existing machine, which would be called little I. That's where he defines the core mechanics. In his framing, OKRs aren't just a goal, they're three inseparable ingredients, and this is what the OKR stands for. O, objective, a short, memorable, inspiring statement of what you want to achieve, usually a 90-day challenge. K, key results, measurable signals that show whether you've achieved it, ideally outcomes and behaviors, not project milestones. And C, cycle, a recurring loop, set, align, kickoff, weekly check-ins, review, tied to lean PDCA thinking, or plan, do, check, act. It's a simple continuous improvement loop used to learn what works, adjust quickly, and then steadily improve results. So for plan, you define the goal, target condition, form a hypothesis, and decide what you'll try, including what you'll measure. For do, run the experiment, carry out the plan on a small scale if possible. Check, review the results against what you expected, use data to see what actually happened. And act, decide what to change based on what you learned. Standardize it if it worked, adapt and run a new test if it didn't. In the Lean OKR context, PDCA is the engine inside weekly check-ins. Pick an obstacle, run an experiment this week, check what changed in the key results measure, and adjust next week. And then Chapter 1 lands a crucial warning. OKRs can't float in midair. They need to connect to mission, vision, and strategy. Otherwise, the organization is just picking goals like a Spotify playlist, whatever feels good this quarter. Also, this becomes a major theme. The author insists you need two systems. First, a strategic framework, OKRs for breakthrough and change. And then an operational framework, KPIs, key performance indicators, and health metrics to keep the lights on. If you mix those two together, you get a messy list. Some moonshots, some maintenance work, some vague aspirations, and no one knows what matters most. Chapter ends with a blunt test question for leaders. Why do you want OKRs, and what specific business problem will they solve? Because Google does it, fails that test. And even alignment and focus, he says, are not good enough as primary reasons. They're side effects. That's where Chapter 2 begins. Chapter 2. The real enemy is the whirlwind. Chapter 2 names the thing that kills most OKR programs, business as usual. The whirlwind, the day-to-day machine, the stable system of habits, meetings, incentives, processes, and urgent requests that keep the company running, but also keep it stuck. The author frames it like systems thinking. Stable systems resist change. When you try to push a stable system in a new direction, it pushes back and tries to revert. This is why so many OKR initiatives die with good intentions. People return to the old rhythm. The whirlwind wins. Then the author lays out 5 root causes behind most OKR failures. And it's important, these aren't your OKRs weren't formatted correctly. They're structural failures. 1. Command and control organization design. If leaders dictate solutions and teams simply execute, OKRs become output lists. You'll see symptoms like success measured as shipping features, handoffs in siloed departments, hidden strategic information, roadmaps launched without measuring impact, weak experimentation, low autonomy, and limited customer contact. In that world, OKRs can't work as intended because the organization isn't built for learning and adaptation. 2. Leaders can't answer, why OKRs? Why now? If there's no urgent business problem, OKRs feel like extra bureaucracy. 3. Poorly written OKRs. Not perfect is fine. Early OKRs will be rough. But if they're vague, unmeasurable, or output-based, the system generates nothing useful. 4. Too many OKRs. This is where the lean angle shows up. Organizations create excess inventory of OKRs, hundreds of goals, soulless OKRs. Then they buy software just to manage the mess. But focus is the scarce resource OKRs are supposed to protect. And 5, no visible results. If progress isn't visible week to week, the system becomes a quarterly scoring ritual. People get discouraged and abandon it. The author warns this takes time, multiple cycles to learn. Then Chapter 2 clarifies when OKRs are the right tool, when the strategy requires behavior change under uncertainty. Then Chapter 2 clarifies when OKRs are the right tool, when the strategy requires behavior change under uncertainty, not just decision and budget execution. And he introduces a sorting model that's more practical than it sounds. Sign and go strategies. You can approve them and execute. Buy a tool, hire people, acquire a company. Behavior change strategies require people to do things differently, harder, needs learning and reinforcement. And BAU operational work, which is business as usual operational work, managed through KPIs, key performance indicators, and thresholds. Lean OKRs live in the behavior change space, and because behavior change is hard, the author argues for something radical. 1 breakthrough OKR per cycle at the company level. Not 10, not 50, 1. Because you can't change many habits at once. Then he warns about traps that make OKRs collapse into project management, turning OKRs into initiative lists, using project portfolio management as the engine, treating OKRs as return on investment wrappers. His argument is that stretch goals don't submit to clean upfront planning. If you can list all the actions in advance, your objective probably isn't much of a stretch. And if you build OKRs on milestones, you can't learn weekly. Finally, Chapter 2 stresses conditions for success. Executive ownership, not HR-led. Emotional management. People must feel urgency. Diverse, multidisciplinary teams. And then starting small and scaling carefully. At the end of this chapter, you can feel the message tightening. OKRs aren't a goal format. They're an organizational operating system. And then Chapter 3 says, if you're going to do this, you have to write OKRs that actually work. Chapter 3, Writing OKRs that don't collapse into a project plan. Chapter 3 starts with a familiar mistake. A team chose launch the new web shop as their objective. So this is a website that sells their products. Sounds fine until they try to write key results. And all they can come up with are milestones. Finish the design, ship the code, go live, which means they built a project plan with a fancy label. The author's point, launching a web shop is a means. The objective should be the outcome. What changes for customers? What improves in the business? What behavior shifts? So instead of launch the web shop, you might aim at something like reducing drop-off, increasing repeat purchases, improving conversion, something measurable and meaningful. Once you reframe the objective as an outcome, suddenly you can measure weekly. You can experiment. You can discover alternative solutions. And this is where the chapter introduces one of the book's most useful mental models, the zone model. Comfort zone. You're doing what you already know. Learning is limited. Learning zone, productive discomfort. You have to experiment and adapt. In danger zone, goals are too extreme, too fast. It's too much stress, there's burnout, there's demotivation. Lean OKRs aim for the learning zone. And the author warns stretch goals have side effects. They can narrow focus. They can trigger unethical behavior, reduce intrinsic motivation. So treat them like prescription medication. Correct dosage matters. Supervision matters. Again, he repeats the rule. Don't tie OKRs to compensation. You need psychological safety for stretch goals to be real. Then he gives guidance for writing good objectives. Awesome objectives. OAR, SOME. Awesome objectives. The checklist includes being inspirational and concrete, mostly number-free, measurable in principle, controllable, culturally aligned, short, simple, and specific. He suggests a target length, about 7 words, not as a law, but as a discipline. And he provides 2 recipes to help teams write objectives. The first is verb plus adjective phrase plus noun plus adverb phrase. For example, grow high-quality leads for product X, or acquire new customers at no expense, or boost daily watch time. Sometimes objectives can be more powerful when they start with a noun. When starting with writing objectives, it can be easier to think about the subject of the goal first. Measurement expert Stacy Barr had a different recipe for formulating a measurable goal. Noun plus linking verb plus adjective phrase or adverb phrase. For example, retail customers promise external loyalty. Leads are doubled for product X. Or daily watch time grows exponential. But more importantly than grammar is the warning. If your objective includes and or while, you probably have 2 objectives crammed into one. Then he offers 2 techniques to calibrate the objective's level. Because clause. Link the 90-day objective to a longer-term purpose. Decrease onboarding time because we want to grow our install base. And then the 5 whys. Keep asking why until you reach the underlying outcome. And he adds a creative suggestion. Create a picture of success, even using Lego serious play to make the objective tangible for different thinking styles. Then we get to key results, the instrumentation. Key results, he argues, should do one thing above all: drive the right customer or employee behavior. They should be quantitative, trackable frequently, outcome-focused, few in number, controllable, aligned, aspirational, and owned. He recommends pairing key results, quantity and quality, to reduce gaming. And he insists if you can't update a key result at least monthly, preferably weekly, it's not suitable because weekly check-ins without fresh data become pointless. He introduces 2 tracking mechanisms: weekly confidence scores. Do we still believe this is achievable? And end-of-cycle grading for learning, not punishment. And he gives a writing formula that forces clarity. Increase or decrease some statistic from X to Y by this time. The takeaway of the chapter is that writing OKRs is not an art, it's a discipline. And in the next chapter, he says discipline requires measurement that actually helps you steer. Chapter 4, Measurement. The difference between a living system and a dead document. This chapter is about the thing most organizations get wrong: measurement. The author claims Lean OKRs live or die by measurement quality. Because if you can't measure progress frequently, you can't learn during the cycle. If you can't learn, your OKRs become aspirational posters followed by quarterly grading. He clarifies what measures are for: track progress toward the objective and inform reflection and decisions. Then he cleans up vocabulary that often gets muddled. Data is raw values. Measure, data with defined unit and context. Information, measures with meaning attached. Indicator, measures over time showing a trend. And KPI, a special kind of indicator tied to performance, key performance indicators. That might sound academic, but his point is practical. Teams talk nonsense when they aren't precise about what they track. He offers a 3-step approach. A, use a method to find candidate measures. He highlights 2. Goal, question, metric. GQM. Start from the objective, ask what you need to know, and then define the metrics. Or the fishbone Ishikawa. You map causes of the problem and make key causes measurable. And he warns, don't start from the data you already have. Start from what matters. Step 2 in the approach. Define the measure clearly. He borrows a 4-part definition. Statistic, count, percent average. Attribute, what you're measuring. Scope, segment and boundary. And frequency, per day, per week, per month. The third step, convert it into a key result with a baseline and a target. Back to from X to Y by when. Then he attacks the excuse, we can't measure intangibles. If you can observe evidence, you can measure it. Measurement is just reducing uncertainty based on observation. So, grow engineering culture is too vague until you define what you'd observe in 90 days. More automation, less legacy burden, more time spent improving the system, and translate that into measurable signals. He also pushes a hard stance. Monthly measures are usually too slow. Weekly or daily is ideal. Then comes the heart of the chapter, lag versus lead measures. Lag measures tell you what happened. Monthly recurring revenue, NPS scores, revenue. Lead measures predict and drive future performance and are influenceable and frequent. He uses a simple health example. Body mass is lag. Daily calories and exercise are lead. Most organizations choose lag measures because they're easy and executive-friendly, but teams can't steer with them week to week. It's like driving while looking in the rearview mirror. So the goal is to find lead measures, behaviors, and controllable signals that move the lag outcome. He distinguishes 2 types of lead measures: small outcomes, frequent results teams can own, and leverage behaviors, the behaviors you want repeated consistently. And he suggests studying high-performance teams. What do they do differently that you can count? He introduces the ABC model, antecedent, behavior, consequence, to analyze behavior change. And finally, he points to a pattern from high-growth companies. The most powerful measures often define activation and engagement behaviors that correlate to long-term value. In short, if you can't measure weekly, you can't learn weekly. And if you can't learn weekly, Lean OKRs can't be lean. So then Chapter 5 takes the big question every leader asks. How do we align the whole organization without drowning in OKRs? Chapter 5. Cascading without creating a bureaucracy. Most OKR guides talk about cascading like a waterfall. Company goals cascade to departments, cascade to teams, cascade to individuals until everyone has OKRs and no one knows why. This book pushes back hard. Den Haak's position is simple. OKRs lose power when you create too many of them. So cascading in Lean OKRs is not about coverage, it's about leverage. The single OKRs to rule them all message is that you should keep one company breakthrough goal as the needle-moving focus. And only teams that can actually influence the outcome should create supporting OKRs. That means something that feels counterintuitive in many companies. Some teams may not have OKRs tied to the company OKR in a given cycle, and that's okay, because forcing alignment creates fake key results, vanity metrics, and initiative lists. Cascade should preserve integrity. Only teams with real influence participate deeply. Others keep business as usual, healthy, and support where needed. Chapter 5 also reinforces the 3-bucket model: sign and go strategies, behavior change strategies, leading to Lean OKRs, and business as usual operational framework, which leads to key performance indexes, KPIs. If you try to cascade business as usual into OKRs, you get the OKR everything trap again. So cascading becomes less like copy these OKRs downward and more like company chooses the breakthrough outcome. The few teams with leverage define their outcome measures and lead measures. And everyone stays aligned to intent, but not everyone invents key results to justify existence. The chapter warns against the 2 failure modes: cascading into initiative lists and cascading into project portfolio management. Lean OKRs require stable teams that can learn continuously, not temporary project teams chasing milestones. Then Chapter 6 confronts the underlying requirement. None of this works without empowered teams. Chapter 6. Empowered teams make the difference. This chapter is almost like the author pulling the curtain back and saying, if you ignore this, everything else becomes pretend. Lean OKRs only work when teams are genuinely empowered, not accountable for outcomes, while leaders still dictate the solutions. This chapter argues that OKRs are a behavior change system, and behavior change at scale requires autonomy, trust, and capable cross-functional teams. If you don't have that, OKRs become one of three things: a relabeled backlog, ship feature X; a compliance ritual, score quarterly; or a fear generator, sandbagging, hiding, and bad news. Empowerment in this context has a specific meaning. Leaders own direction, mission, vision, priorities, boundaries, resources, ethics, and the why now. Teams own the outcomes, experiments, trade-offs, and solutions. Accountability shifts from outputs to learning and impact. This requires stable, cross-functional teams that can run end-to-end loops, discover, build, measure, iterate. If work is organized as temporary project teams, empowerment is structurally undermined. Then the chapter focuses on leadership behavior change, from control to coaching. Leaders must stop equating leadership with giving answers. They must invest in unblocking teams, growing capabilities, and supporting learning. And again, psychological safety matters. Don't tie OKRs to compensation. Stretch goals require risk-taking. If people fear penalty, they set easy targets. They hide problems, they avoid experiments, and optimize metrics instead of outcomes. The chapter suggests practical mechanisms that make empowerment real. Clear decision rights, transparency of information and metrics, outcome-oriented key results, weekly check-ins as learning loops, not status meetings. And it hints at a better performance management model, continuous conversations, recognition, and feedback, rather than using OKRs as a quarterly judgment. So by the end of Chapter 6, we've got a clear picture. Lean OKRs are not a goal sheet, they're a system. And that system requires culture, empowerment, and measurement discipline. Now, Chapters 7 and 8 move from theory to the ground. What do you actually do in a room full of humans set to align and launch OKRs? Chapter 7, the OKR Setting Workshop, where goals become a real bet. Chapter 7 shifts into practical execution, running a successful OKR setting workshop. The premise is that good OKRs are rarely written by a lone leader in a document. They're crafted in a structured workshop that creates clarity and commitment and sets up the conditions for weekly execution. And the author is clear, the workshop is not a bureaucratic ritual. It's a design session for a 90-day behavior change strategy. A successful workshop produces more than well-worded statements. It produces a single explicit bet for the cycle, key results that make progress visible quickly, shared understanding of why this, why now, and commitment without coercion. The workshop also makes failure visible early. If the output is a laundry list, milestone key results, or business as usual disguised as OKRs, you're setting up a dead cycle. Chapter 7 emphasizes something many teams try to skip. You can't workshop your way out of missing strategy. The workshop needs inputs. Strategy and the needle. What metric or constraint must move? Health metrics, KPIs, so you don't break operations chasing the OKR. Evidence and insights, customer data, funnel metrics, quality indicators, and scope clarity, company versus team OKRs, what's in, what's out. Then come facilitation principles. Structure beats charisma. A facilitator needs to protect focus and time boxes. Leaders shouldn't dominate. The group should keep pulling language from build ship back to change a measurable condition. Psychological safety matters here too, because people need to say, we don't know what will move this yet, without being punished for uncertainty. This is a crucial point. A good OKR is a bet with indicators, not a fixed plan. Then the chapter reinforces how to design the objective in session. Short, inspiring, number light. Tied to strategy. Hard enough to require learning, but not so hard it pushes into the danger zone. And designing key results returns to the measurement doctrine. Quantitative, updatable weekly, outcome, behavior-focused, paired to prevent gaming, and few in number. As a practical test, if you can't think of weekly trackable key results, the objective is likely too vague or too solution-shaped, or you're stuck in lag measures. The chapter lists common failure modes. We need more OKRs, often a focus problem. Milestone key results. Reframe this as outcomes. Opinion battles without data. Assign discovery or use proxy measures. Wrong people in the room. No empowered decision makers. A good workshop ends with a clear objective, a small set of key results with baselines, targets, and owners, open questions and risks stated explicitly, and readiness for alignment and kickoff. And that's where Chapter 8 begins. Chapter 8, Alignment and Kickoff, turning published goals into public comments. Chapter 8 argues that OKRs don't create alignment simply because they're visible. Uploading them into a tool doesn't automatically produce coordinated execution. Alignment is work, and it usually requires a deliberate alignment stage plus a kickoff that turns written goals into public commitments. This chapter describes two types of alignment you have to solve. Vertical alignment. Do team OKRs actually contribute to company key results? And horizontal alignment. Have teams addressed dependencies and trade-offs with each other? Then it describes 3 strategies for alignment, increasing in structure. 1. Alignment through transparency. Publish drafts broadly and let others review. This is the lightest weight, but the author says it rarely works in immature cultures. People don't naturally read other teams' OKRs or proactively negotiate dependencies. Transparency alone becomes everyone can see it and nobody acts. 2. 360-degree alignment workshop. Bring together OKR owners and representatives from teams to negotiate dependencies, resources, and improve OKR quality through critique. This is the most common approach. The author emphasizes representation. Don't bring whole teams. Bring OKR owners or reps who can speak for their teams and negotiate. A subtle cultural point, the author normalizes making demands on others' time and resources. Mutual support is part of the OKR social contract. The agenda has 2 phases: presentations, short pitches, dependencies called out, structured feedback, and then publication. Incorporate changes and finalize, then publish broadly. And once OKRs are published, they become a public declaration. No turning back. 3. Alignment through shared OKRs. Instead of separate OKRs for marketing, product, IT, etc., create shared cross-functional OKRs across a value stream. This is alignment by design. It can also be a lever for moving away from silos toward product value stream teams. Then comes the kickoff, because even aligned OKRs don't matter if nobody pays attention to them. The kickoff converts visibility into commitment. It reinforces transparency, creates shared understanding, and uses public commitment as a positive force to resist business as usual gravity. Kickoff formats can vary: presentations, emails, short videos, but the core is consistent. Recap the mission, vision, strategy, and company OKR. Teams present their OKRs briefly. Q&A for clarification only, no renegotiating, and then optional learning shares from the prior cycle. Leaders modeling vulnerability. By now, if you step back, the process from chapters 1 through 8 is visible as a coherent story. 1. Start with purpose and visible progress. 2. Recognize business as usual and the systemic reasons OKRs fail. 3. Write outcome-based OKRs that live in the learning zone. 4. Build measurement that allows weekly steering, lead and lag measures. 5. Cascade with integrity, leverage over coverage. 6. Build empowered teams and coaching leadership. 7. Set OKRs through structured workshops. And 8. Align and kick off so OKRs become public commitments, not hidden documents. And the deeper message underneath all of this is, Lean OKRs aren't really about writing goals. They're about building an organization that can learn faster than uncertainty changes the game. They're about choosing one important thing, measuring it in a way that teaches you something every week, empowering teams to run experiments, and using alignment and public commitment to keep the whirlwind from swallowing you whole. That's what it means to move the needle. And if you're listening to this thinking, okay, but can we actually do that here? That question is the point, because Lean OKRs don't start with a template. They start with the willingness to do fewer things, measure what matters, and let teams own outcomes rather than outputs. And as the author would probably say, it's time to step out of the comfort zone. So that's where we're going to stop for today. As you can see, OKRs are really an engine for innovation, and you have to have an organization that has psychological safety and the leadership on board with an OKR approach to growing innovation within the company. And innovation is required to keep companies relevant. That's especially true in the age of AI, where everything is changing at a much faster pace than it ever has before in history. So, thanks again for your time and attention. This has been part 1 of Moving the Needle with Lean OKRs by Bart Den Haak. If you're implementing OKRs in your organization, I highly recommend picking up a copy of the book. A lot of detail in it, a lot more than I am presenting here. This is more of a high-level overview. That said, I think the high-level overview is helpful in helping you navigate the detail that's in the book. I look forward to seeing you for part 2 next week. Remember that our website is innoguide.net, where I have many resources for innovators and people who want to build medical products with or without embedded AI, and those who want to use AI in their process, and those who want to learn to use AI in their development process. You'll be learning it from someone who's worked in medtech for 30 years and has been using large language models since they emerged in 2022. I want to thank Steve McIntyre for producing this. I want to thank you again for joining, and I look forward to seeing you next time. That's a wrap.